I love GoldenEye Rogue Agent. I know what you're thinking, I know what the reviews have said, and I've heard its issues laid out over and over again ad nauseum. I also know it's one of the single most unique and interesting FPS games I've ever played, attempting to offer up an experience so cool, so sensory, and so cinematic that ever since playing it as a kid, it's always been a game I end up revisiting from time to time. GoldenEye Rogue Agent is an all-style, some-substance experience with some of the dumbest dialogue and concepts I've ever heard, littered across a fanfiction-level storyline that is more often than not overindulgent in its own ideas, and plays like a stiff, slow, unfinished beta build. And I just cannot get enough of it. In fact, this was actually the first game I ever made a YouTube video about. Years ago, on a different channel before this one even existed. Long before I was even monetized or even considered myself to be a YouTuber.
It's not the best Bond game by any means, but it's certainly the most unique in terms of its concept.
That video is long since buried now, along with that channel, but at the time of recording it so long ago, I said something that I maybe shouldn't have. That I thought it'd be poetic if at some point I decided to stop covering games, then maybe I would take one last look at this game to kind of wrap it up with bookends. You know, do a proper revisiting of the game. Well, this is not my way of saying I'm done covering games, not by a long shot, but a lot has happened since then, however, and I found myself knee-deep in 007 video game coverage, which is not a series I realized I wanted to cover when I made that statement so many years ago. And this was the next one in line. I won't lie about this either, I've had some anxiety that by covering this game, I'd trigger some kind of cosmic sequence of events where doing this video would lead to the end of my channel and career as a YouTuber, which I don't want. So why am I here making this video now? Because some things deserve a second look, and some promises deserve to be broken. Released on November 22nd in 2004, GoldenEye Rogue Agent tackled the very difficult to understand decision to make a James Bond game where you don't play as James Bond. Instead, you play as this super cool original character the studio whipped up, and get this, you're the bad guy. This OC is an unnamed ex-MI6 agent dismissed for reckless brutality and then later recruited by Auric Goldfinger to fight his war against Dr. No. And although this character's real name is never revealed to us, in-game they simply call him GoldenEye. Look, I think it's probably pretty obvious why they called him GoldenEye, but for those of you who don't know anything about this game, I just want to clarify that although this game is called GoldenEye, it has nothing whatsoever to do with the GoldenEye film, and plays literally nothing like that game. The similarities begin and end with them both being set in the same universe and featuring one mutual character in both games that I'll talk about later. Although there is an in-game canon reason why they call him GoldenEye, and it's the most obnoxious, obtuse thing imaginable, I still love it so much because it also deeply affects the gameplay. Yeah, so at some point, somehow this character's eye was shot out of his skull Snake Eater style by Dr. No. And then Goldfinger's technicians, specifically one of Bond's most notable villains, managed to replace it with a gold synthetic eye that gives the player superpowers, basically. But however stupid of a justification this is to call the game GoldenEye, I do want to press that this was not the developer's decision and they actually pushed back against it. Unsurprisingly, it was some EA executive's call. The game was originally supposed to be called Goldfinger vs. Dr. No during development, which would have been a decent title, but somehow isn't much better even if more accurate. So I do sympathize a bit because how do you connect a game that has nothing to do with 007 to the 007 world, but emphasize that you are playing as a rogue agent? I mean, they probably could have just called it 007 Rogue Agent, to be honest. I mean, yeah, Bond is barely in it, but I'm pretty confident most people would know what's going on and think, oh, it's a Bond game, but you're the bad guy now. Cool. At some point, though, they slapped the GoldenEye name on it, which is arguably the worst out of all potential choices as they were invoking the name of one of the most beloved FPS games of all time, roughly 7 years after its release. And then the gaming press never forgave them for it. Every review spent half its word count complaining about the false advertising before ever getting to the actual game. This name set expectations the game was never designed or even trying to meet. Not too dissimilar to the whole Prey 2017 fiasco where Bethesda made Arcane call their sci-fi M-Sim Prey because they thought it'd make it sell better. And I think the vitriol just increased from there since the original GoldenEye was such a beloved gem of a game. This one only came off as an edgy fraud to half the people who played it. Because there's nothing GoldenEye about this game. Well, except for the literal golden eye, at least. Speaking of which, that part of the game is actually kind of sick. It takes the experience from being a run-of-the-mill shooter to a pseudo-tactical experience where I found myself literally relying on my golden eye to survive and push forward through arenas. There is a very distinct and satisfying gameplay loop here that gets overlooked constantly by people too busy complaining about all of its admittedly many flaws. Over the course of the game, we upgrade our bionic eye with 4 distinct abilities that severely affect the game's combat flow. MRI vision that allows us to see our enemies through walls, electromagnetic hacking of both enemy weapons and machinery that we can use to ensnare combatants, a polarity shield that deflects bullets, and a magnetic field that allows us to send enemies flying in whichever direction we want. This was my favorite, but they could have balanced it better to allow us more access to it. This game is a certified black sheep, cold-shouldered by a publisher that lost faith in it and pushed out the same year as Everything or Nothing, meaning it was competing against a game with a much larger budget and far more fanfare. It's really not fair, to be honest. This game should have been delayed to 2005 and allowed a little more dev time and space between it and another better Bond game. In spite of that, however, it's so clear that the developers believed deeply in the game they were trying to make here. This game wants to be cinematic, it wants to be sensory and stylistically distinct. A non-canon, edgy power fantasy shadow self of the usual suave and charming 007. And since it's a game about Bond bad guys, you can guess that our villain roster is totally stacked here too. Oddjob, Xenia Onatopp, Pussy Galore, Dr. No, Auric Goldfinger, and my favorite, Scaramanga, whom they actually managed to do justice by thanks to Sir Christopher Lee agreeing to come back in and reprise his role. Yeah, the genuine man with the golden gun is not only in this game, he also acts as GoldenEye's alternative to Q from the regular games.
I'm Francisco Scaramanga. Your golden eye was built by one of my contacts.
Speaking of Bond movies, I wanted to give a quick thanks to my members and patrons for supporting me and my content. For those who don't know, I've actually been doing simple talking head reviews of the Bond films for my members only content and over on my Patreon. So far, I've done all of the Brosnan films, A View to a Kill, and fittingly for this one, I've just dropped my review of Dr. No for members and patrons to watch. So if you want to hear my thoughts on the Connery film that started it all, consider joining up and checking it out.
Let's fly.
Then there's the game's visual style. Graphically, this is a step down from Everything or Nothing in some ways, which came out the same year and set the bar uncomfortably high. But it definitely holds its own through its unique style and graphical atmosphere. The character models are a little hit or miss, but the environments range from good to great. I was always enjoying wherever I was in my surroundings, and there were even some times where I would just stop and appreciate what I was looking at. Many critics call the level design drab, but for the most part, I just do not agree. I found most of these levels and their designs to be downright inspired, and I think a major reason why is because for me, the technology isn't what matters, the art direction is. See, the team brought in Sir Ken Adam as production designer for Rogue Agent. If that name doesn't ring a bell, Sir Ken Adam is the Academy Award-winning production designer who literally created the visual language for the Bond film universe. The man who designed the War Room in Dr. Strangelove, the man responsible for the iconic sets in Goldfinger, Thunderball, and even The Spy Who Loved Me. The entire visual identity of cinematic Bond villainy that everyone associates with the franchise. In one of the best decisions that was made regarding this game, they brought Sir Ken Adam in to consult on how the villain locations in this game should look. That's the reason Fort Knox and Ark Enterprises looks the way they do. And you can see the deliberate attempts to recreate the heightened operatic scale of classic Ken Adam production design inside of a PS2 game. If EA had just held out and not lost faith in this game, I think it actually could have looked even more insane than it already did. And I think this because the game itself is stuffed with unlockable concept art that shows us imaginings of a game twice as insane as the one we got. This concept art is downright beautiful, man. It's grand, cinematic, and architecturally obsessed. These are some fantastic Bond villain layers, man. Swiss concept artist Christian Lorenz Scheuer worked directly under Ken Adams' influence influence to design the game's locations, and the gap between that concept art and the finished PS2 geometry is where most of the criticism over this game's design comes from, I think. But it also tells you what the team was reaching for. And as if they weren't already being ambitious enough, they also went on to program and design their own custom artificial intelligence system specifically for this game called the Evil AI System, which obviously stands for something they reverse engineered from the acronym, like FEAR as a video game title. Their hope was that enemies would react dynamically to your eye powers, your position in a firefight, and their own environment, using cover intelligently, communicating with each other based on what they saw you doing, and adapting to your tactics. In another parallel to Fear, that game is often given credit for how well the AI reacts to your position and actions, but the truth is, this game did it first. Just not as well. I mentioned how something like this is seen in like one part of the mission in Nightfire, but in this game, it actually happens constantly. Enemies are always calling out your position, changing their behavior when you hack their weapons, and responding differently depending on which GoldenEye ability you're using. And there's so many lines they could potentially call out. I mean, straight up dozens.
I see him behind the forklift. He's gonna try. Stop that leg, stop it.
For 2004 on a PS2 FPS, that's a genuine technical ambition worth acknowledging. The game has this dark, industrial, oppressive look. Steel, shadow, and villain architecture. It doesn't have the warmth or cinematic gloss of Everything or Nothing, but it was never trying to. It's going for something colder and more threatening, a visual language that matches its premise. A game about working for the bad guys should feel like you're inside the bad guys' world, and for all its graphical shortcomings, Rogue Agent's art direction consistently communicates that you were somewhere dangerous, expensive, and deeply evil, and we can thank Ken Adam for that. Now normally I save my gameplay breakdowns for later in the coverage, but I'm switching it up here for a few reasons, such as flow, but the main reason is because the single biggest criticism I think this game deserves is its aiming. The truth is that most PS2 FPS games do have stiff, clunky aiming, but this game's aiming is particularly bad. I'm being so serious when I say that we could probably add 2 full points to Rogue Agent's rating just by making it playable with mouse and keyboard and upping the player speed by about 5 notches. I understand that it's been balanced around your character sluggishly meandering around like he's made of cement, but it's just so suboptimal. I had fun, that's not the point, because I did really enjoy this game. I totally understand why so many other people didn't, though. And more importantly, I see how completely outstanding it could be if just played a little faster and with aiming that actually worked. Imagine pushing through an arena, using your eye abilities to activate a trap, killing a few guys while snap aiming over to a balcony to take someone out, and as he falls you melee a guard, take him hostage, and push forward using your eye again to sling an enemy against a wall. All of these mechanics for that exact scenario already exist in this game, just not with the balancing, programming, or aiming for it. It's so ahead of its time in so many ways as well. Other games would be chasing this kind of mid-combat hacking dynamic for years after this. And the aura of every combat engagement is nearly unmatched. The way the music changes dynamically to reflect the intensity of combat is another thing that this game completely nails too, which I'll talk more about later in the music section, but the way it goes crazy when you take a human shield is just so hype. Look, I love this game for everything it is, and I have replayed it many times over the years as well, but it is riddled with shortcomings, not least of which is its paper-thin fanfiction-level power fantasy plot, which we'll be getting into next, right after this short section sponsored by me. Did you know that your creativity acts like a muscle that can be trained, overtrained, run sore, and even be conditioned to be both more creative and easier to access? Here's the question. Are you currently working on or wanting to work on some kind of passion project? Because if so, you probably know all too well the struggles of staying creative, staying inspired, staying focused, overcoming writer's block, and dealing with burnout. Maybe you want to be a YouTuber and you don't know where to start. Maybe you want to write some kind of album or fiction book, and yet you just haven't been able to either bring yourself to get started or you keep running into walls when you're working on it. Whatever it is, That is exactly what Creation Nexus is for. Creation Nexus is a guided framework spread out across 9 lessons curated by me to help reshape your perspective on being creative, and to equip you with the tools you need to fully unlock your creativity and find out what inside of you gets those creative wheels turning. It's a very specific framework for the person who knows they're creative, but has found themselves either in a rut or lost amidst a sea of distractions and conflicting online advice. My goal is to get directly involved and equip you with the tools you need to figure out what's missing from your project, and then offer you a community of like-minded individuals who you can bounce ideas off of, workshop your project with, and help complete it to its best possible state. Creation Nexus is about taking seriously your pursuit to be creative, understanding the structure that feeds your creativity, learning to receive critical feedback, and progressing your craft as a creator. It's a community of accountability to make sure you're finishing the lessons and putting to good use the tools that we're giving you, so we can make sure you're seeing real results from your time there. We run weekly calls where we bounce ideas off of each other, share our progress as we're putting the work in on our projects, and sharpen iron against iron, which has been valuable to me even as the person running it and the other members of the community who have been participating so far. So far we've got 3 indie game devs, 4 YouTubers, a composer, and more, and we're all sharing what we're working on every week. But what we're missing is you and your creative ideas. We're missing the passion project that you've been working on, that we want to hear about, that we want to see and offer feedback to. If you're tired of working in circles on your passion project, then come find us. If you send an email to the address on screen with the topic line Creation Nexus, you'll receive access to a PDF version of the Creation Nexus framework that's been highly condensed just to give you an idea of what it is. Along with that, I'll send you a video of the first lesson from Creation Nexus totally free just to get you started. And even that should be enough to help you figure out where to go about getting started or refining the project you've been wanting to do. All you gotta do is send an email, so there's no reason not to do that and at least see what this is all about. I can't wait to see you in the Creation Nexus on Skool.com and hear all about your project. You'll find that link in the description. Now let's get back to the video. The game opens on a short piece of dialogue from M, once again voiced by Judi Dench, who reprises her role here and adds another level of credibility to the game's world.
3 years ago, while on assignment, the agent was severely wounded in an encounter with Dr. No and subsequently lost the use of his right eye. Consumed with vengeance, he frequently resorts to violence and brutality and is no longer fit for service with MI6.
It actually has such a cool feeling about it too, hearing M describing this character's origins. From there, the game takes us back 3 days as it introduces our first mission.
Auric Goldfinger, a member of the most powerful criminal organization in the world, has seized the U.S. gold depository at Fort Knox. He intends to irradiate the bullion reserve with a nuclear device, which will devastate the global economy. As his crimes threaten the security of the Bank of England itself, you and 007 will work in concert with Army commandos to neutralize Goldfinger's men, then locate and defuse the bomb.
M details that Goldfinger has seized the gold reserve in Fort Knox and is planning to irradiate the whole supply to destabilize the value of the world's gold, thereby increasing the value of his own, which is actually just the entire plot of the movie Goldfinger itself, but there is a reason for that, which we're getting to. We're then placed into a helicopter with 007 himself, as he instructs our character on his heads-up display, among other things. This is actually the only time Bond is in the game, is this short little cameo at the very beginning. And funnily enough, as much as this kinda looks like Pierce Brosnan, it's not. It's just a similar look-alike face, but I will say it fooled me as a kid, that's for sure. Not that it matters. Yeah, so we just watched James Bond die and the game has been running for less than 5 minutes, and the game is immediately also firing on all cylinders directly from the start. Any skeptic should be able to acknowledge how cool this is, at least in concept. It takes only moments before I am dual-wielding multiple weapons and taking down enemies.
You're dead! You hear me?
There's these little tutorial laptops scattered around to kind of show you the controls and help you get acclimated to the game's various features, which is cool, but honestly the game is intuitive enough that they're not really necessary. You'll more than likely figure all this out just by playing for a few minutes. So the way the weapon system works in this game is actually pretty interesting. There's only one weapon slot. So yes, you can dual wield, but you can't hold two weapons in two different slots, so no sidearm. Once you grab a gun or two guns in your hand, that's all you get, and there's no swapping between them. The only way to attain another firearm is to grab one off the ground or use up all your ammo, thereby returning you to your default pistol. This pistol is my favorite design weapon in the game, even though it's the weakest because it's so stylized and cool to look at, and since your character tosses his weapon the second it runs out of bullets, you'll be pulling this one out a lot through your playtime since it's got infinite ammo. 8 rounds per magazine with infinite mags, so you'll be seeing it a lot as it'll be your fallback anytime you run through the mags you've already used on any weapon you've picked up. You are able to pick up additional magazines for whatever you're holding if you dispatch an enemy holding the same firearm, but the game's pacing typically ensures you'll run out of ammo eventually by varying the weapons coming at you in every arena. It is a very unusual system for guns in a shooter game, but I thought it made for a very dynamic experience, and it's also really unique. I haven't really seen anything like this in another shooter. This particular arena shows off another thing this game loves to do, which is incorporate environmental interaction via these traps intended to kill enemies. We've been seeing stuff like this since Agent Under Fire, and it's always fun. Although admittedly, it can be very hard to lure the AI into these sometimes, so ultimately they're hit or miss depending on the level. This leads us into the massive open areas within the Fort Knox vaults that clearly resembles the ones we saw in the original Goldfinger film. Shout out Sir Ken Adam once again, whose influence is shining through here. I also like that we can see the chopper we came in on crashed into the ground in flames here too. Good attention to detail in the level design. With that, we locate the inner vault entrance where the bomb is stored and rush in to stop it before it goes off.
We need fire support!
So what just happened there? Well, essentially, that whole mission was just a simulation designed to evaluate whether this unnamed MI6 agent is fit for duty.
You were directly responsible for the death of 007. Your tactics are inexcusable. There's no place at MI6 for an agent like you. You're dismissed.
Like we covered earlier, 3 years before the events of the game, Dr. No shot this agent's eye out of his skull, and he survived. But the experience broke something in him, making the agent obsessed with revenge as he started relying on brutality in a way that made him dangerous to work with. So M wanted to know if he was salvageable. He wasn't. In the simulation itself, we play out the events as we preoccupy ourselves with taking human shields, using the environment to splatter enemies with fast-moving trams, and mercilessly killing whomever is around us. I mean, it's not really ours as the player's fault that Bond dies, because we literally can't save him in-game, and also no matter how well you play it, it won't change the outcome. But it's still a cool way to open the game and set the stage for your character's psychotic leanings. M fires our protagonist on the spot, charges him with reckless brutality, and as he walks out of MI6 headquarters, he's already reading Goldfinger's recruitment offer. Fired by MI6 for being too good at violence, and immediately hired by a supervillain specifically because of it. As far as villain origin stories go, it works well and wastes no time. Also, M is not exactly wrong. This agent is portrayed as dangerous, unstable, and tending to prioritize killing over the objective. You are exactly what M says you are, a rogue agent. Roll credits.
We have a common enemy. Dr. No has broken ranks with our organization. He must be eliminated.
I declare war on Goldfinger. War.
You will have your vengeance against Dr. No.
And reclaim what he took from you. The rewards will be great.
An eye for an eye.
Right after that, we get a cutscene of Dr. No directing an assault on Goldfinger's compound. The man is then shown monologuing to our protagonist about his new mass energy weapon called the Omen, or rather, Organic Mass Energy Neutralizer. Goldfinger's war with Dr. No is pretty much the spine of the whole story. Goldfinger has developed a weapon called the Omen, capable of disintegrating organic matter on a nearly atomic level. Dr. No wants it. Goldfinger wants to use it, and GoldenEye is the enforcer caught in the middle, working for Goldfinger and cutting through Dr. No on his quest for revenge, funded by Goldfinger along with his brand new, well, GoldenEye. It's fanfiction writing through and through, two of Bond's most iconic villains and a criminal civil war with you as the muscle. But it's fine because all of this is really just set dressing to fuel the power fantasy. These characters are here for fan service, since this whole game is just pure fan service anyway. I mean, just look at this game's cast. Oddjob is on our side, Xenia Onatopp is working for Dr. No, which makes her your primary antagonist for a stretch of the game. We got Pussy Galore as GoldenEye's pilot, and Scaramanga, again, voiced by Christopher Lee, is GoldenEye's equivalent of Q, fitting him with the bionic eye and its upgrades at the start of the game. Taking it seriously is simply missing the point. We're in Auric Enterprises, where the game grants us our first GoldenEye power, the MRI vision, which essentially just lets us see enemies through walls. It's not overly useful unless you're holding a specific weapon that lets you shoot through walls, which they conveniently give us right here. If the game had better aiming, this would be cool, but it doesn't, so instead it feels a bit unsatisfying to use, despite my many attempts to enjoy it across the game. I do still love the design of Goldfinger's evil supervillain lair, though. In fact, I think I actually just outright disagree with half of the criticisms this game received about bad level design. Like, I mean, look at this. I didn't appreciate the fun traps as much as I should have in these earlier levels back in the day. One thing I will grant is that you've already seen pretty much everything this game has to offer at this point. Unlike other 007 games, this one has no vehicle levels, spy sections, or anything like that. It's all just pushing forward and shooting bad guys. Although based on some concept art, I do think this game was supposed to feature driving sections of some kind, because there's various art of our protagonist on a motorcycle powering through the streets, which would have been mad cool, but I imagine their funding and time got cut when EA lost faith in the project. One thing I found strange is that GoldenEye is depicted as wearing gloves in his key art, but they decided against that for the final game for some reason. I actually think it'd have been cool to have full-on gloves rather than the fingerless ones, but regular hands is fine too, I guess.
Do you expect me to talk? No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die.
I also really love this underground area too, where we see all of this industrial equipment and everything. This feels very early 2000s in terms of game design, and I love these giant rock grinders here as well. If this game had just a little bit more audacity, it would award you points for throwing enemies into that grinder, but unfortunately it doesn't. Even the reload animations of this game are so cool. Your character is constantly flipping, spinning, and twirling around the various weapons he's working with because this game cares about how sick it is, even if they don't make feasible sense sometimes. I see shells ejecting, but how is he getting new shells in? Oh, and as you can imagine, the sniping in this game is deplorable. There's only a few sniping sections and they're all optional, but the aiming is so bad that it's honestly shocking. Again, this would be fixable with just a simple PC port. Somebody please decompile this game. I like this little tunnel area too that takes us out of the compound and into the super cool destroyed dome-like area where we're expected to extract. This is also just so cool to me.
Your clones are very impressive. You must be very proud.
Although this whole ending fight is a little rough around the edges, I still think the aesthetic is very much there.
My name is Pussy Galore. You look like you could use a ride.
Miss Galore flies GoldenEye out to another of Goldfinger's locations, built into a literal volcano called The Lair, telling him that they have powerful friends who are working with them. Thus, we finally meet face to face with Scaramanga.
I've arranged for periodic upgrades as well, which you'll find useful while in service to our comrade Goldfinger.
Dr. No will stop at nothing to obtain the Omen. We must act now before he launches another attack.
Meeting with Goldfinger, the man informs us that his informants have tracked Dr. No to a Triad-owned area in Hong Kong, and offers us the opportunity and equipment to track him down and assassinate him. And since our character's primary motivation is revenge for losing our eye in the first place, that suits him just fine.
Dr. No's tower is impossibly secure, but you will have a clear shot from the neighboring construction site. Don't miss.
Once again, I know it's not the same kind of stunning visuals we've seen in other PS2 games I've covered before. I'm thinking mainly of Nightfire's Hong Kong level. I still do adore the way this game looks. I mean, the nighttime neon skyline of Hong Kong is always going to be a vibe for me in a good video game level, but I just like this overall. This level is also where we get to play with our second GoldenEye power, the EM hack ability. I mean, it's pretty cool since it allows you to activate consoles and traps from a distance, which I rarely ever did, but the cool thing is that it does let you EMP your opponent's firearms, temporarily making them unable to shoot at you. I used this one slightly more, but still less than the other two powers, which we haven't gotten yet. Anyway, the assassination attempt clearly doesn't go our way, as once we arrive at the location to take the shot at Dr. No,
Goldfinger pays me well, but Dr. No pays me better.
Okay, so when writing this, I came up with this theory that maybe this Triad informant character was at one time intended to be Bullion from The World Is Not Enough based on this design, which would have been a stellar use of another Brosnan-era villain, but after confirming it in the credits, this is just a nameless Triad informant. These cutscenes are so blurry, it's impossible to tell, and I may have just been having flashbacks to chasing this character in those The World Is Not Enough games. Either way, it was a missed opportunity. I will admit that there's a good amount of this level that's made up of these unfinished floors, and some of it feels, well, unfinished, but I don't hate it. Oh, fun, there's an elevator section. You know, if this game played more like Nightfire in its shooting mechanics, it would probably have been more appreciated as a kind of darker version of that game, because this one's level design and aesthetic definitely do feel a lot like Nightfire. Also, these scripted little zipline sections are very fun in concept. I love doing them, but only in like a, imagining how cool it would look in a movie if I'm seeing an unfinished VFX or something. Because in reality, they're just super clunky, and the aiming is so bad that I end up just shooting in the general direction of an enemy and hoping I hit something. But I do love how this game lets us have these shootouts across a series of skyscraper rooftops, and this one even lets us use these cool spinning power panels for cover as we fight. Speaking of traps, we get another fun one here with these massive fire-breathing dragon statues that we can try and use to destroy these kind of hovercrafts. The rooftop fight goes on for quite a bit longer before we find ourselves fighting through a kind of research lab where Dr. No has been doing some kind of research here in Hong Kong. Go figure. Goldfinger asks us to hunt down and find those terminals and then download as much of the research data as we can before we make our way out of here, which leads us into this kind of, I guess you'd call it sort of a mini boss battle? We're given a litter of rocket launchers we can use to shoot at these hover carriers, and we have to destroy them, which is, it's playable. These things aren't very fun to fight, to be honest with you. Once again, I like the idea a lot of having these things be kind of reoccurring enemy types, but like many things in this game, the execution simply feels incomplete. I also really love this area where we're killing guys under these massive neon signs. Dude, I'm telling you, this game would go so hard with just a few finishing touches and tweaks. We'll be back to another very similar arena like this shortly, but first we end up taking a detour through this bathhouse area, which, again, is a very cool arena to fight through. I particularly like this trap where we can hack these saunas to lock people in there and turn up the temperature to burn them alive. Again, this is so visually interesting, and some of the game's later missions kind of get bland, so I'm giving all the points to it that it deserves now. Either way, after this, we wind up back in another big rooftop battle against Dr. No's personal super helicopter. It's just a boss battle version of the previous mini-boss battle where we run around the rooftop and shoot missiles at it until it becomes damaged enough to knock down our way out of here. You cannot say this game's levels are not action-packed and cinematic, I'll tell you that much. We get one final arena battle across a rooftop where we're accosted on all sides by soldiers and carriers alike while we hold out for extraction. After evacuating the failed assassination attempt in Hong Kong, we head back to base where Scaramanga installs a new power into our eye that gives us the ability to
generate a magnetic polarity shield capable of deflecting all damage for a short period of time.
Then Goldfinger gives us the lowdown on his current plan involving his Omen device, which he's moved to the vault beneath his Las Vegas casino. Xenia Onatop has been spotted in his Midas casino, which means we're heading to Vegas.
I'm eavesdropping on Dr. No's frequency. Sounds like the action's concentrated on the lowest levels, near the vault.
Oddjob is already on the ground. Your fastest entrance will be through the Sky Lounge. You must begin there, then work your way down. Protect the Omen at all costs.
Stepping into the Midas casino, I don't understand how people don't vibe with this game's level design. Look how interesting and cool all of this is. And of course, Midas is a great name for a casino owned by Goldfinger. Less than a minute in, and we're encountering Xenia firsthand.
New cowboy. Watching you die will be very pleasurable.
Following her blocking our way, we see some of Dr. No's assault squad rappelling down as an attack helicopter tears through the place with its machine guns. Luckily, I found out it has a vulnerability for just a barrage of shotgun shells. There's also something so satisfying to my brain about running down hallways dual-wielding weapons. It's super unrealistic and silly, but man, I love how it looks and feels to do. Since we're dropped off on one of the top floors of the casino, a portion of this level actually sees us going from lift to lift as we descend down to the lower levels of the building. So we'll be spending some time in these elevators shooting at enemies and aircraft as we make our way down. We also get to fight alongside Goldfinger's private mercenaries in some parts too, which I like. It's always neat when a game gives you friendly NPCs sometimes. Makes the world feel more alive. Upon making it to the lower levels of the casino, we find ourselves on the main floor, which is great because we can immediately take this guy hostage and just walk through this game room full of liquor and slots as we put down as many people as we can in the process. The machines bust and spark when they're shot, and the design is once again completely inspired with how the lights and architecture are placed. It's also here where we face down a named mini-boss named Thorson. I'll talk more about these encounters later, but just keep in mind that this game features a plethora of slightly stronger enemies with names. We can see how they've been blowing holes in the floor and drilling through parts of the casino in search of Goldfinger's Omen device, and following through this tunnel leads us into another much larger game room, and this one is gorgeous with an open roof design where we can take out another aircraft along with various of No's mercs. I was disappointed you can't play the piano here like an Agent Under Fire though. Another missed opportunity. We're getting close to the vault at this point, and while the level design is about to get a bit more corridor heavy than usual, the deeper we get into the casino, the more villainy things start to look, which is great. I love these big TVs with the sinister looking logo on them, despite us still technically being on the accessible floor of the casino. But we're pretty close to the vault now and should be able to begin our descent soon. Okay, well that's a minor setback. Looks like No's got some super drills down there looking for the Omen. Take a good look at that car because it's as close to a vehicle section as we get in this game. We're able to head down through the tunnel left behind by this drill, and of course it's loaded with more of No's mercs for us to kill. Finally, we make it to Goldfinger's vault to find it's been overrun by mercs, and even though I actually hate how this part of the level is laid out and find it very unfun to play, this is where the game gives us a minigun. Doing this, we're able to hold off the mercs until Oddjob is able to secure the Omen for Goldfinger, and then we watch him extract. We're then told to fend for ourselves here until she can return to extract us, which leads to a short last stand in this small room while we wait for our exit to arrive. During this fight where we push back against our adversaries, Goldfinger calls in to tell us that this is actually a great time to test fire the thing, and then advises us to activate it and bail before it goes off.
Give Dr. No props for originality. The Midas assault was staged from Hoover Dam. He's got a seismic bomb in there. The US security forces don't dare approach for fear he'll blow the whole thing.
Dr. No's attack is not over, GoldenEye. You and Oddjob must infiltrate the dam and locate the seismic bomb. Detonate it, and No's army will be swept to oblivion.
Well, right away, I'm a fan of this giant open visual for the level. Drink in how cool this all looks, because most of the rest of this level is pretty samey for the most part. This is true of a lot of these next few levels actually, meaning I'll have less to say about them in some ways, but there are still some cool things to make note of here. Like for instance, I love how we get these massive open indoor areas where the game lets us attempt to utilize its sniper rifle. I'm terrible with sniping in games that have good aiming, so every hit in this one was like a mini victory. I also really enjoy how this level has a kind of feeling of constant ascension to it. From the start of the mission to the end, it feels like we're constantly climbing upwards. Ladders, stairs, more stairs. I mean, look at how we're killing these people on this winding staircase as we fight our way up to the top. Not to mention how this game has so many different styles of handguns. Like this one that shoots remote detonated Simtex charges that stick to people. So satisfying to use. I think I'm deep enough into the video to get away with this hot take as well now, because it might piss some people off, but after having played through Black on the PS2 a few months ago, and even doing a video on it, this game plays very similarly, albeit slightly worse than that one. Which is a little bit frustrating since that game is lauded as one of the greatest PS2 FPS games, and this one is often cited as one of the worst. It's just a little unfair is all I'm saying, but before you start commenting, I'm not saying this game plays as well as Black does. It doesn't. But it doesn't play much worse either. Something else I haven't covered yet, but brought up earlier, is those named NPC mini-bosses. So across these levels you'll encounter a large handful of what look like any other NPC enemy, but they have a little named subtitle over their heads and significantly more health than the other enemies. I mean, that's the beginning and end of it really, but what I wanted to talk about here is what I think the developers were going for. I like this idea, but it feels a little undercooked. Villain henchmen are an iconic part of the 007 mythos, and here we're basically playing as a villain henchman, and so what I think they were trying to accomplish with these named enemies are the idea that we're taking down other villain henchmen throughout each level. Really cool idea, but I believe it could have been handled a little better with more unique lines of dialogue or more unique character model designs, but ultimately it doesn't do anything but make the game flow a little more dynamic, so I'm fine with it. The level ends on a climactic and destructive walk across the top of Hoover Dam where we take out a handful of tanks with a rocket launcher and carve through roughly a dozen or so enemies. This is not fun, despite how it sounds. It's just too chaotic, and there's little to no cover, and it feels like the game forces me into a very slow gameplay style, not to mention it just goes on way too long. I'm not a fan of this part at all, and we'll get another similar part later, but it's shorter and less frustrating to deal with.
Tell me, does the toppling of American missiles really compensate for having no hands?
On the other side of that whole situation, we find ourselves descending deeper into the dam's interior, which has been flooded with No's mercenaries for us to cut through. Again, from a visual standpoint, these environments look incredible in my opinion. I love how all of this feels to play through. The scale is simply magnificent. Most of the game's most breathtaking sections are these larger outdoor areas, and most of the more samey, less compelling ones tend to be the tighter corridor sections, like this next area where we'll be shooting our way through this room of massive turbines with a minigun. Although I did like this weird room with a giant elevator. I have no idea if there really is an area like this in the actual Hoover Dam, but it does make for a brilliant set piece. Especially as we're ascending this massive tunnel slowly as we're taking out enemies all around and above us with a minigun. At the top of this area, we finally locate the bomb and hit the latch to drop it into the shaft below. That was weird. Wasn't he on our side? Either way, no time to waste. We exit the room and start making our way back up towards the top of the dam so we can find extraction. Killing our way through a series of tunnels, murder maxing these fools on our way out until we reach the top.
I haven't kept my promise.
So she just spared him to kill him in armed combat? Seems like an odd choice to me, but whatever, we get to kill Xenia Onatopp now. In that way, this game is similar to the original GoldenEye. Remember when we kill Xenia in that game? She's also such an easy boss battle too. We just hit her with a few rockets and give her a swift punch to the jaw. It's kind of like that scene from the GoldenEye movie, except Bond had a bungee cord and she didn't. So Xenia is dead and the dam is destroyed, but we're able to extract in time and head back to Goldfinger's hideout where Scaramanga introduces us to our fourth and final GoldenEye ability.
I procured a special upgrade that features the world's most advanced magnetic field transducer. With it, you can align ambient magnetic fields and focus them briefly to strike a target.
So essentially, we can throw enemies around the map like ragdolls. I mentioned earlier this is my favorite of the abilities, but man, I wish they'd handled it a little differently because it uses way too much power. Goldfinger then gives us a rundown of his next mission for us to infiltrate Dr. No's Crab Key base of operations.
Its location is guarded like a state secret. We don't even know where the coordinates might be.
Actually, Arik, there is one place.
Of course, the octopus. It is our auction house, bank, and black market all in one. Its computer core holds Dr. No's most secure data. Getting in will be the easy part.
Welcome to the octopus. Please remain still for recognition scan.
So the big reveal is that Blofeld is involved in this little skirmish somehow. But what matters now is that we're about to stage a one-man assault on what is essentially a supervillain auction house of evil schemes and dastardly deeds. This game is so stupid, but I love it. So here we are as an agent of Goldfinger about to crash a very expensive party for some very threatening people in a heavily guarded underwater hotel. It's just so good, man. As much of an apologist as I am for this game, I will admit that this is probably the last level of the game that I genuinely had a great time with from beginning to end. The last two levels have a lot more flaws overall, so I really appreciated my time in this one a lot. The density of enemies is ever increasing, as is the lethality of the weapons available to use. More opportunities to use the explosive handgun that fires sticky remote detonated grenades. It's a great time. Speaking of great times, now is actually a great time to talk about those little icons you see popping up on the screen. Depending on how well you perform across a level, at the very end of every mission you will have earned a certain amount of octopus tokens. This is the game's ranking currency. The octopus imagery is threaded throughout this entire game, as you may very well have already seen. I mean, it's even on our protagonist's handgun. A handgun which I would absolutely love a working replica of, by the way. The game's attention to the octopus imagery is a small detail, but it tells you that somebody on this development team cared about cohesive world building on this project, which is what I always adore to see. Also, this is the first level of the game where you may find yourself start to play differently, and it's because of our new GoldenEye ability. Where previously I was using cover and trading shots, now I'm sending enemies flying into walls, off ledges, and even into each other. The magnetic field power is my favorite for a reason, and it turns every engagement into a physics playground. At some point, we'll reach what I would simply call the gun room, a large space where there's a gap in the rail and an elevator on the far side that the objective arrow is pointing to. And the reason I call it the gun room should be obvious. There's a computer bay on the other side of the room where you need to use your EM hack ability to extend the bridge across the gap. I also like this little hallway where we can observe how we're in an underwater supervillain lair too. This game is completely underrated as far as aura goes, and I will die on that hill. Following this, we find ourselves in this kind of control room where a team of security guards foolishly tries to stop us, and we get to make short work of them. It's of course fun times here as we take down this place as thugs, but you know I can't let slide this massive money room. I have no idea what to make of this area because it's a giant blue neon lit room full of giant stacks of money. Like cold, hard USD cash.
I gotta do it, man.
And following this is another neon blue lit room where we can release platforms intended to kill enemy NPCs, but I didn't find it to be a very effective trap. Cool idea, but it just wasn't very fun to try and use. And it might just be my being traumatized from that one last level in Everything or Nothing, but I did not enjoy this small section filled with shipping containers at all. It was a fine corridor shooting section, I guess, but I'm a little corridor shooting warehouse sectioned out at this point. Although to be fair, once you get to the other side of this warehouse, we're back to the cool lavish auction house look, which I love. Did I mention how fun this remote detonated Simtech shooter is yet? I also love this arena full of old Egyptian artifacts and things clearly intended for dastardly rich people to gawk at during their stay here. Next up is one of my favorite environments of the game, even if it does make for an awful combat arena. Look at this cartoonishly stupid supervillain-ass computer. It's so dumb that it wraps back around to being cool again. I actually love this so much. The blood red fog effect, the weird steel boxes coming out of the floor and descending back down again with the red neon lines in them. It simultaneously feels like an area I'd have seen in both Quake 2 and Destiny 2. Video game arenas pretty much never have this kind of aura anymore. You're going to want to use your eye hacking on these turrets to get them on your side to survive this, by the way, because they will rip you apart otherwise. But it did feel cool to realize this on my own, instead of having my character or a voice in my ear suggest that I hack the turrets to stay alive.
Focus M.
The next section sees us fighting our way through a series of corridors intended to prep for either underwater diving or a submarine departure. This isn't quite our exit, however, but it does lead us into this really neat, core of the base with these giant spinning gears. I legitimately don't think this game ever gets enough credit for how interesting its environments are. I'll grant you they're not always the most conducive to great gameplay, but they're just so rule of cool. This whole game is practically built on the rule of cool even. I'm not sure what this big-ass Tesla coil thing is, but for some reason it gives us the opportunity to electrify whatever floor is directly above us and rack up kills, so I'm good with it. And just to keep things interesting, the very next room is filled with these massive hydraulic press machines that will crush you if you're not paying attention. Are you seeing the vision yet? Look, you don't have to think this game is good. I'm just asking, if this game was to be played with a mouse and keyboard and actually controlled smoothly, are you seeing how this might be complete fire to play? Finally, we use Goldfinger's money to buy a submarine that we'll use as our exit, and amusingly enough, you're given the opportunity to buy several things via these little terminals like I mentioned earlier, and if you do them all, he'll get mad and tell you to stop spending his money.
You have the navigation coordinates. Now get out of there and stop spending my money.
Dr. No's naval operation has been compromised, his forces decimated, and the magnetic field has shown itself to be our most devastating and final tool in the arsenal that Scaramanga has given us. At the end of this hall is the room where our submarine awaits, and all we have to do is clear it and say goodbye to our time in the octopus.
I am certain Dr. No has been made aware of your attack on the octopus. Therefore, I cannot deploy the Omen on Crab Key and risk making it a target. Instead, you must infiltrate the island and find your way to the central compound.
So we're at Crab Key now in what I'd call a great throwback to the Dr. No film. It almost feels like 2 levels stitched together and then handed to you as a single mission with no warning about how long it's going to take.
Use the explosives you so generously charged to my account at the octopus.
The opening section of Crab Key is built around this exterior dock area with shipping containers and big boats sitting in the water, which is a little uninspired in my opinion. Right ahead of you is a terminal and a bridge, and then the terminal lowers the bridge, and you just keep moving forward. The level design is less inspired in this mission and the next one, I've talked about that, but it does try to make up for this by giving us a minigun. I don't really think it's enough to rectify the overall design issues, though. And it doesn't get much better when we get into the indoor areas either, and believe me, it'd be much nicer if I could say it did, but it just doesn't. I do like this big gated area, I guess, but that's legit just because I like the early Y2K design style that this area reflects. I don't know if I can even explain what I mean by that, but if you know, you know. This leads up through a massive shaft of sorts and into a kind of cave-like set of tunnels. This part was notable because I love how the game shows us this massive excavation site in the distance, and even cooler, that's actually where we're headed right now. I was wrecked in this next part of the game too, by the way. For some reason, I died more times at this one little section than anywhere else across the whole game. As you can see though, we're currently in that area we saw from the distance earlier and using these zip lines to slowly make our way down. Again, this is super creative and I love the idea, it just wasn't hitting for me aesthetically. Even though this game doesn't have rain effects, this would have been the level for it since we spent so much of it outside. The mid-afternoon look was just not doing it for me here. Once we finally make it to the bottom of this dig site, we have to fight our way through this long tunnel, which leads us to one of the more interesting parts of the level where we get to fight our way across these catwalks. We get these traps that are supposed to let us activate them to drop guys into the chasm below, but I didn't manage to actually nail this, unfortunately. On the other side of this section is the entrance to the supervillain secret lair, and it's guarded by these two super tanks with spiky tops for some reason. We blow them up with a borrowed rocket launcher and make our way inside of Dr. No's base. That's actually not the end of the level, surprisingly, but this next part does offer something a little more visually interesting for us to play through. We're definitely getting some of that Ken Adams influence here because look at this. Over-the-top bad guy level design to its very core. All we have to do now is find the facility's nuclear reactor and sabotage it to put a permanent end to Dr. No's operation here. But before we can do that, we get our chance at some payback as we finally take down his personal aircraft that previously vexed us back in Hong Kong. And speaking of payback, we won't have to wait long before our inevitable reunion with the man who took our eye and kicked off this game's events. Through those doors, Dr. No is waiting for us, ready to defend his reactor, and we get another boss battle where his thugs try to overwhelm us. It's not that hard of a battle in itself, but the weapons our opponents are wielding do make it annoying if they manage to hit you. I'm referring specifically to the Venom gun, which slows your movement and aiming for a few seconds if you're hit by it, and also the Semtex launcher pistol. They're much more fun to use than to have used against you. The basic premise here is just to kill these guards and survive long enough to hack these computers, keeping the energy shields up, guarding Dr. No and his reactor. Once that's done, we can just mag dump him and call it.
Tell me, does the toppling of American missiles really compensate for having no hands?
Unfortunately, GoldenEye, I must confess that this victory is entirely mine. Your return flight has been cancelled. Auf Wiedersehen, GoldenEye.
Predictably, Goldfinger has betrayed us, but fortunately for us, Dr. No had an extra one of his super helicopters chilling in the hangar for us to snag and bail out of here. Hell yeah. Also, Pussy Galore is not remaining on Goldfinger's side and has recruited us to put a stop to him in his volcano lair before things get out of control.
I've procured a virus that can overload the Omen, but you will never get close enough to use it on your own. You must free the captives in the lair's detention center. You have their allegiance. They will fight for you against Goldfinger.
When the voice of Sir Christopher Lee tells me to do something, I do not ask questions. The first thing this level does is introduce us to the game's most lethal weapon, a handheld version of the Omen device. It fires a slow-moving blue projectile that can easily be dodged, but will also delete anything it touches. I've made jokes on this channel about using guns to delete NPCs before, but that's actually literally what this thing does. I mean, just look. Oh yeah, now we're talking. Goldfinger's not going to double-cross us and get away with it. GoldenEye, as a character, was always just a weapon pointed at whatever target Goldfinger had chosen for him. And the moment he became more of a threat than an asset, Goldfinger tried to discard him. And now, GoldenEye is coming back to the lair that made him, once again, for vengeance. The prisoner Scaramanga has told us to find and free are Goldfinger's own former guards, the same faction you've been working for the entire game, professional criminals who followed the wrong employer and got betrayed for it, exactly like he did. Which is why they're willing to fight alongside GoldenEye when he finds and frees them. You learn very quickly to scan for the Omen XR during encounters too. You gotta pinpoint whoever's shooting blue bullets and take him out as soon as possible, because if even one of those hits you, it's an instant game over. The architecture is built around large, dramatic spaces connected by corridors, which means your eye abilities have some room to breathe. MRI vision through walls to scout ahead, magnetic field in open spaces where there's room to send enemies flying into structural elements, and the EM hack on Goldfinger's only security systems now actively working against him. The prisoner detention blocks are the level's central structural objective. Find them, free the guards, and suddenly you're not alone anymore. Not to mention how cool it is that they chose to put the prisoner release button in this room that we saw in the Dr. No film from 1962. Super cool, love this.
Sit down.
Freeing prisoners transforms the level from a solo infiltration into something approaching a faction war. Multiple liberated guards following you, clearing ahead, taking pressure off your flanks, and occasionally even doing something that matters, like independently engaging and managing to actually kill an enemy. I actually think this is pretty cool for a game from 2004. Friendly AI that actually functioned isn't something that was super common back then. I mean, yeah, you had some games like Halo and whatnot that had like Marines and allies, but most of the time, they outright didn't function and weren't a threat to the enemy. So it's cool that in this game, your allies can actually do some damage. They really were trying to make something incredible with this game. We get to fight through these neon-colored training rooms, which is a fun callback to the little tutorial videos where Scaramanga was showing us how our eye works. Rather than just relegating that environment to a tutorial video, the game lets us play through it in a way that makes sense. And it's crawling with named enemy bosses too. These arenas were also pretty challenging because the named enemies are all carrying Omen XRs, which means they can just insta-kill you if you're not paying attention. But I love how everything looks. These spaces do get a little repetitive because there's multiple of these rooms, but the fact that we get to fight alongside allied AI and the colors of the rooms change keeps it feeling fresh enough in my opinion. I also love how we get to see Scaramanga's testing room here with the chair that gave our protagonist his golden eye. Not to mention we get to see this in-game as an arena that we fight across. It's just such a fun use of the area. And we even get to see these various weapon models hanging from these gun racks enclosed in this glass. Back to the plot, Scaramanga has left a virus that he made specifically to destroy the Omen in that chair for us, and so we take it and begin making our way towards Goldfinger. Following this, however, we're given arguably the game's most annoying section as we fight our way up this set of ascending balconies surrounding this giant Tesla coil thing. Again, dealing with insta-kill weapons the whole way up. I was good enough with my GoldenEye powers by this point, however, that I could quickly activate my shield and protect myself from the Simtech shots when they stuck to me, which was a very cool element of gameplay. I also love the little supervillain boardroom thing they've got going on here. It's very 60s Bond. And lastly, we're in the final push. The path to the Omen takes us through some of the most densely populated combat sections of the entire game. Seems like Goldfinger's forces knew what was at stake, because if the Omen is compromised, their entire operation ends along with everyone in the base, and the enemy placement in these final sections definitely reflects that. Multiple Omen XR carriers clustered around the weapon's location, heavier armored enemies positioned to create crossfire, and overall far less cover than I think I'd gotten used to up to this point. Not to mention, I'm a fan of this big kind of final arena where we fight off dozens of Goldfinger's mercs in this room where in the center we see a giant globe with lasers pointing at all the places he presumably wants to use the Omen. This kind of reinforces the idea that although we're a vengeance-fueled murder machine at this point, we're also the only thing standing between Goldfinger and global catastrophe. Finally, once we reach the main hangar, we can confront Goldfinger once and for all, and I'll just let the sequence play out.
Damn you! Not even a nuclear detonation can end your miserable life! You mean to kill me, of course. But unlike Dr. No, I have the upper hand, GoldenEye. Even as we speak, the airlock where you stand is being vacuum sealed. Soon, you will feel delirious, and before long, you will suffocate. And I will be most gratified, as you are the last impediment to my plan. I am impressed with the expert mayhem you have dealt on my behalf. But you are too powerful, and therefore a liability.
The Omen!
You know, I think I'd have preferred if they implied that GoldenEye had died here or tried to leave it more ambiguous, because what we get instead with Pussy Galore, saving him is just, well, it's not unlike any other Bond ending, but I didn't feel it fitting for his character, I think.
A splendid effort, Francisco. My compliments.
Thank you, number one. Of course, your plan is perfectly conceived. The rivals devoured one another as you predicted.
Yes. But in removing Arik and Julius, we may have created a third threat to the organization.
So what of this GoldenEye?
I will keep an eye of my own on that one.
And that sequel never happened. I lament that I can't play more of this track because it's so good. Although it's not quite a title theme like the last two games we've had, It's the game's version of that idea. It's an industrial metal remix of the song If You're Gonna Jump by Natasha Bedingfield, remixed by Paul Oakenfold. It's a brilliant and appropriate track for the credits, and I love it. It would not be fair to say that GoldenEye Rogue Agent is an objectively good video game, but it would be fair to say that it was one made with incredible passion, excitement, and love from start to finish. The genuine black sheep of the Bond franchise. Forgotten and forsaken from the brand at large and relegated to the mediocre pocket of obscurity that is the unpopular PS2 games catalog. The story itself is dumb. I'm not defending it. This is quintessential fanfiction level writing through and through, and not even particularly sharp fanfiction writing either. It's a box of 007 toys thrown into a playpen for our cool, edgy, badass self-insert OC to overpower and show who's boss. And that is exactly why I adore it so much. I revel in this game's adolescent nature. I love how it wears its alternative universe excuse as a way to push the 007 mythos to absurd extremes, which is something that many modern games have completely lost. Adolescence, whimsy, the heart of a child, even if that child is the heart of a 10-year-old boy who just wants to be a badass, edgy, anti-hero secret agent. A sequel was intended for this game, but unfortunately never panned out. I can't find much info on this, but the wiki claims it would have featured vehicle sections and a longer campaign mode, which I would have very much welcomed. The game obviously ends on a cliffhanger too, bringing in Blofeld and hinting at Spectre becoming a more major villain in future titles, so it's needless to say I was pretty disappointed at no follow-up. Not to mention that since Bond was only killed in the training simulation, we could have seen a genuine 1v1 of this character and 007 himself, which would have been so cool. We'll never know for sure now, but one may dream of what could have been. So I guess now's the time to talk about the Nintendo DS version of this game, and man is it something. Unlike the other mobile iterations I've talked about up to this point, I didn't bother to fully complete this one, but that's only because it's somehow a nearly identical experience to the main version. The levels are almost complete replicas, and the mechanics are too, just redesigned to be used with the touchpad. It's actually one of the most impressive mobile iterations I've ever seen so far in terms of how close of an experience to the original it's able to deliver. Obviously, I'm emulating this footage, and so a lot of it is clunky, but this is the first 007 mobile iteration I've seen where you can get something almost the same as if you played its main console counterpart. And that's really an impressive achievement for a mobile title. Whereas The World Is Not Enough for the Game Boy Color, and then Nightfire and Everything or Nothing for the Game Boy Advance were all clearly just different games inspired by the design document of the main game, Rogue Agent for the DS is actually just a genuine port of it. I did own a Nintendo DS for several years, but I don't think I ever even knew this port existed. Otherwise, I promise you, I would have played it. It's legitimately fun to play and interesting. I like how we use the touchpad to activate our eye powers and even look around the screen, which I didn't know until I was already pretty deep into the game. And then we have the only really bad thing about this version, which makes it infinitely inferior to its main console counterpart, that being the music. It's not bad by any means, but it feels generic and nothing even close to the main game's music. Speaking of which, I absolutely adore the soundtrack of GoldenEye Rogue Agent. It's so unique, interesting, and keenly aware of the game it's intended for. The only way I can describe it is electronica-infused industrial rock and metal music. Each level is drowning in dozens of different versions of tracks that dynamically change based on what you're doing in combat, how intense things are, how creative you're being with your kills, and all of it is fantastic. The score here was composed by Paul Oakenfold, even though for some reason he doesn't represent it on his site or his Wikipedia. Oakenfold is most known for this style of music across his very expansive discography of remixes and original music, not to mention the sheer volume of different tracks we'll hear while playing the game. I just adore this game's score, man. I've been listening to it on and off for years, and even put together my own remaster of the game's main theme myself, going as far as to re-record the guitar and re-sample the drums. This was years ago, but I'm still proud of it. Alright, there's no putting it off anymore. We gotta talk about GoldenEye Rogue Agent's multiplayer, because this game, by even daring to call itself GoldenEye, even if the devs didn't want to do that, still invited comparison to the original GoldenEye 64's multiplayer, which meant it had some enormous shoes to fill. And nobody really thought it did fill them, actually. Rogue Agent's multiplayer comes across as bare bones and tacked on. I can see how people buying this hoping for an experience similar to what they'd found in the game's N64 counterpart might have been disappointed. I don't think it's terrible by any means, but I wouldn't exactly call it great either. Now's a great time to point out that there's no bot functionality for Rogue Agent, so in order to actually experience what this game's multiplayer felt like, I reached out to my boy Mach3, who's something of an expert on getting old video game multiplayers up and running. With his help, I was able to set up the ZEMU emulator to play with him and his community and really experience what Rogue Agent's multiplayer had to offer. And my thoughts are...
No, I don't think it's good. I
don't think it's bad.
I don't think it's that bad.
Look, the majority of the maps are just recycled arenas from the single-player mode with a few exceptions, and the modes themselves aren't overall that inspired. The gameplay is fine, but it doesn't feel all that different from playing the single-player, except that I can't enjoy the major elements that help this game stand out. When I think of GoldenEye Rogue Agent, I think of grabbing human shields, abusing my GoldenEye abilities, and gunning down hordes of enemies in unique arenas, whereas the multiplayer lacks most of this. Even the occasional interesting arena level is still unable to be enjoyed past the feel of an average tacked-on FPS multiplayer mode. The GoldenEye abilities are available to every player, but end up nerfed beyond mattering in order to balance the multiplayer experience. I'd have honestly preferred just having no abilities at all, although I do see where their head was at with including them for everyone. Most of the powers are borderline useless, but we can still occasionally use our hacking ability to activate traps at a distance, causing our enemy to fall to their death, or get shocked, or blown up, or burned, or whatever. That part was cool, but overall, the rest of the powers were, borderline useless. Even the polarity shield drains twice as fast as I was expecting it would. We can still throw enemies if we stun them, but this just takes the place of the human shield, which I would have preferred to have in multiplayer. Imagine the feeling of humiliation if you get taken as a human shield and have to withstand in first person being held and shot while someone else has you in a chokehold. Unfortunately, that's not here. Instead, we just grab them and throw them into the wall, instantly killing them. And even that is a hyper rare and overall unsatisfying experience. All of that said, it's basically impossible for me to suggest I had a negative experience overall with how fun the game still is. I did have fun. I enjoyed my time. I would happily play this multiplayer again. The game offers up a brilliantly fun space for players to have fun and hammer out a few good rounds of multiplayer together. I enjoyed it. But I can still easily see how this game got stomped by its multiplayer competition. Halo 2 released this same year. Let's be honest with ourselves here. I hate to be hard on this game's multiplayer mode because I did still have a lot of fun with it, like I said, but I can absolutely see why a lot of people would have ended up disappointed by it if they'd bought this game full price. That's just my opinion though, and thankfully Mach3 has agreed to come in and voice his own thoughts on his experience with the game here after playing it with us. So what did you think of the game, man?
Alright, so I grew up playing a lot of these 007 6th-gen games as a kid, most notably 007 Nightfire, and although I do remember enjoying parts of Rogue Agent, it wasn't really what I would consider as my cup of tea back in the day. So when Evan reached out to the channel asking if I wanted to revisit this childhood chestnut for old time's sake, I thought this would be the perfect opportunity to see if maybe I was just too harsh on this game this entire time. And well, after revisiting it, I'm kind of conflicted on how I feel about it if I'm being completely honest. So think of Rogue Agent's multiplayer kind of like the great value of 2000's multiplayer first-person shooters. It doesn't really do anything particularly different compared to the competition, focusing more on staying in its own lane without feeling the need to reinvent the wheel. And if you ask me, that's not necessarily a bad thing. As a matter of fact, I'd say that this game excels at delivering more of a chaotic, arena-style experience when compared to Nightfire. I think where my feelings get mixed with Rogue Agent lies in the combat, as it just feels like something is missing here. This might be a weird comparison, but playing Rogue Agent reminded me a lot of the original Killzone, as both games share that sensation that the combat is so close to being perfected, but something about it just ultimately doesn't click. When I think of first-person shooters that click, games like Halo 2 instantly come to my mind. You see, in that game, the combat feels tight, the controls work with the player, not against them, while all the weapons in the game have their own distinct personalities and proper use cases. But most importantly, the combat remains incredibly addictive to play. It's the type of game that you can play 100 times and it never ever seems to ever get old. I know I said ever like 100 times there, but you get my point. I guess what I'm trying to say here is that I found that Rogue Agent's combat lacked the refinement and polish and addictive qualities compared to the previous 007 games. Another thing that I noticed with Rogue Agent is how a lot of the multiplayer maps didn't leave much of an impression, and quite honestly, a lot of them ended up feeling pretty forgettable. Like if you were to compare them to Nightfire, where in that game, you can tell that the level designers put in more of a stronger emphasis on stuff like verticality and giving the player multiple different pathways to approach each level, Rogue Agent's maps in comparison feel much more linear and aren't necessarily as interesting to play on. To put it simply, it lacks the 11 secret herbs and spices that made maps such as Skyrail and Snowblind and Nightfire so memorable. At the end of the day, Rogue Agent's multiplayer shows up and gets the job done, but doesn't really give 110% of its effort. It's a serviceable, fun experience that definitely has its moments, don't get me wrong, but I feel like if the devs were given an extra 6 months of development time, this mode would have been up there with Nightfire and Agent Under Fire's multiplayer. So, can I see myself playing this again in the future? Yes. Would I go out of my way to play it though? Probably not. Anyways, thank you so much, Evan, for letting me collaborate in the video. I really appreciate the opportunity, and back to you.
Thanks so much for joining in to share your thoughts, brother, and for making our time spent with it even possible to begin with. Guys, go subscribe to Mach 3 right now, as he does massive full-day streams most Sundays, just keeping old multiplayer games alive and bringing a genuine credit to us retro video game content creators. Bye-bye. So that's GoldenEye Rogue Agent, one of the most bizarre yet conceptually unique gaming experiences I think I've ever had. I have to admit, I've got a very specific capacity to overlook bad gameplay if I like the way the game looks and feels enough. I love lots of bad games because the ideas and concepts are fun enough for me to tolerate bad or unpolished gameplay. The inverse is not true, because I will not suffer a generic or uninteresting story or setting, even for the most incredible gameplay imaginable. Not that the story of this game is particularly good, but the setting and concept absolutely are. I do wish we could see some kind of remaster or even a decompilation port of this game that would allow it to be playable on mouse and keyboard, since that would rectify over half of my real complaints with it. But even so, looking at what we got is still a brilliantly fun time. It's not the best Bond game, or even the best first-person Bond game, or even technically a Bond game at all, but I still love it anyway, both for what it is and for what it wanted to be. Outside-of-the-box creative thinking like this should be rewarded, and something tells me that this won't be the last time I play this game either, because I just love it. The tone, the music, the aura, everything about Rogue Agent is dripping with edge and atmosphere in a way that just appeals to me beyond what I'm even capable of putting into words. Lots of people hate this game, and lots of other people love it. I'm among the latter. A genuine fan of what the team attempted to pull off, and totally willing to die on the hill of this game being an absolute one-of-a-kind. And here's to hoping that one day, this game will see a proper resurgence in a way that is fitting and suited to what it wanted to be.